Dozens truck drivers, Interstate 90, Western New York, all arrested, all allegedly in the country illegally, all holding valid commercial driver's licenses from 9 different states. And here's the kicker, this isn't some isolated incident, this is the tip of an iceberg that's been hiding in plain sight on America's highways for years, and it's only now getting the spotlight it deserves. Let me paint you a picture of what's actually happening on the roads you drive every single day. Over the past few months, federal authorities have conducted sweeps across multiple states, Indiana, Oklahoma, New York, and they're finding the same thing everywhere they look. Drivers operating 80,000-pound commercial trucks who, according to federal officials, should not have licenses at all. In Indiana alone, 146 truck drivers were arrested in a single operation. Oklahoma, over 250 arrests across multiple sweeps. And get this, many of these drivers are holding CDLs issued by states like California, Illinois, and New York. Now, before anyone jumps down my throat, let's be clear about something. This isn't about being anti-immigrant. This is about asking a very simple question. How in the world are people who entered the country legally getting licensed to operate vehicles that can literally flatten a car like a pancake? Because if you're a trucker watching this, you know exactly how hard it is to get a CDL. You know about the medical certifications, the hazmat tests, the skill tests, the regulations, the hours of training. So how are sanctuary states handing these licenses out like Halloween candy? Here's where it gets truly bizarre. Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt held up a commercial driver's license issued by New York during a press conference. The name on the license? No name given. I'm not making this up. A state government issued an official document, a commercial driver's license, to someone whose legal name they did not even have. Think about that for a second. You can get a library card without a proper ID in most places, but apparently in New York you can get cleared to drive an 18-wheeler hauling hazardous materials across state lines with no name given on your license. And New York claims they followed all federal regulations when they issued it. California says the same thing about the licenses they've issued. They all claim they're checking the federal SAFE database, verifying immigration status, doing everything by the book. But here's the problem. The federal government is now saying these people are illegal aliens who need to be deported. So either the system is catastrophically broken or somebody's not being honest about what's really happening. Let's talk about the human cost, because this isn't just bureaucratic red tape we're discussing. In Florida, authorities arrested a driver for 3 counts of vehicular homicide while driving a semi-truck. In California, another driver killed 3 people in a DUI crash while operating an 18-wheeler. Both were in the country legally. Both had somehow obtained CDLs. The families burying their loved ones don't care about the political debate. They care that someone who shouldn't have been behind the wheel of a commercial vehicle was given every opportunity to be there by state governments more concerned with virtue signaling than public safety. Acting Buffalo Sector Chief Patrol Agent James D'Amato put it bluntly. Drivers who can't speak or read English pose a serious risk when operating large vehicles that require a high level of skill and understanding of traffic laws. And he's right. This isn't about xenophobia, this is about the fact that if you can't read a warning sign that says bridge out ahead or sharp curve, you're a danger to everyone around you when you're hauling 80,000 pounds at highway speeds. But here's where the politics get real dirty. Federal authorities are pointing fingers at what they call sanctuary states. California, Illinois, New York, Oregon, New Jersey. These states have policies that limit cooperation with federal immigration enforcement. They've created what critics call a parallel universe where federal immigration law simply does not apply. And nowhere is this more apparent than in their DMV offices, where licenses are being issued to people that other states and the federal government later determined should not have them. Congressman Byron Donalds from Florida introduced legislation that would give the Department of Transportation authority to withhold federal highway funds from states that issue CDLs to people in the country illegally. His argument? If you want to gamble with public safety, you shouldn't get federal money to do it. Blue states create the problem by handing out licenses, and then red states pay the price when those drivers cross state lines and cause accidents on their highways. It's the ultimate unfunded mandate, except in this case, it's an unfunded liability that's measured in dead bodies. The sanctuary state argument is fascinating because it exposes something most Americans don't understand about how our federal system actually works. Oregon has been a sanctuary state since 1987. California passed its sanctuary law in 2017. Illinois followed in 2019. These aren't accidental policies. They're deliberate choices by state governments to obstruct federal immigration enforcement. And the CDL issue is just one symptom of a much larger disease. The Biden administration's approach was to grant parole status to hundreds of thousands of people from countries like Haiti, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. This parole status gave them temporary legal presence in the United States, which them allowed to obtain driver's licenses and CDLs in states that check the federal SAFE database. But here is the catch. When that parole status expires or gets revoked, those licenses don't automatically disappear. The Trump administration ended many of those parole programs, which means thousands of people who had temporary legal status suddenly don't anymore. But they're still out there driving trucks. This creates an impossible situation. DMVs in California and New York claim they followed federal law when they issued the licenses. The federal government now says these same people are illegal aliens who need to be removed from the country. Who's right? The answer is probably that they're both right, which means the system itself is fundamentally broken. And let's talk about the enforcement operations that are happening right now, because they're revealing something even more disturbing. When authorities conduct these sweeps at weigh stations and truck stops, they're not just finding immigration violations. They're finding criminal histories, assault, battery, DUI, drug trafficking, child abuse, rape, domestic violence, fraud, prostitution. These aren't just administrative violations we're talking about. These are people with serious criminal backgrounds who are somehow operating commercial vehicles on American highways. One case really stands out. Akor Pozorov, a 31-year-old from Uzbekistan, was arrested in Kansas while working as a truck driver. He was wanted as a terrorist in his home country. He was paroled into the United States during the Biden administration and given a CDL by Pennsylvania. A wanted terrorist driving trucks in America with a state-issued commercial license. If that doesn't make you question every single assumption you have about how our system works, I don't know what will. The trucking industry is caught in the middle of all this. They're facing a driver shortage that's been a crisis for years. They need qualified drivers desperately, but qualified is supposed to mean something. It's supposed to mean legal right to work, proper training, English proficiency, clean background check. When states start issuing CDLs to people who don't meet those standards, it undercuts every legitimate driver who did things the right way. And it puts everyone else on the road at risk. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristen Noem has been conducting these enforcement operations as part of what she calls Operation Midway Blitz. Her message to illegal immigrant truck drivers is blunt. Your days are numbered. She's made it clear the Trump administration intends to get these drivers off the roads, even if it means fighting sanctuary state policies every step of the way. The Department of Justice has even sent letters to California, Illinois, and New York demanding they honor ICE detainers for criminal illegal aliens. California did not respond. Illinois and New York basically told them to pound sand. This is where we are as a country. States openly defying federal immigration law. Federal authorities conducting sweeps to remove drivers that state governments licensed. Innocent people dying in accidents that never should have happened. And a broken system that allows someone whose name is literally no name given to get behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler. The fundamental question here isn't complicated. Should people who are in the country legally be allowed to operate commercial vehicles that can kill dozens of people in a single accident? Most Americans would say no. Most truckers would say hell no. But in sanctuary states, that question doesn't even get asked because the entire premise of their policies is to avoid cooperating with federal immigration enforcement. And while politicians argue about jurisdiction and states' rights and sanctuary policies, diesel prices are climbing. The national average has hit a 2025 high of $3.87 per gallon, up nearly 25 cents in 4 weeks. Owner-operators are getting squeezed by fuel costs while spot rates continue their downward trajectory. Legitimate drivers who did everything right are barely scraping by. Meanwhile, some carriers are apparently hiring drivers who should not even be in the country because they're cheaper and they'll take loads at rates legal drivers can't afford to run. The Department of Transportation says they're going after what they call CDL mills, operations that issue licenses to unqualified drivers. They're also promising consequences for carriers and shippers who knowingly employ illegal licensed drivers. But enforcement has been inconsistent at best, and the sheer scale of the problem suggests it's been ignored for years. Here's what really grinds my gears about this whole situation. Truckers are constantly lectured about safety. They're regulated to death with electronic logging devices, hours of service rules, drug testing, medical certifications, random inspections. They're held to incredibly high standards, as they should be. But then sanctuary states are out here issuing CDLs to people whose immigration status is questionable at best, whose criminal backgrounds haven't been properly vetted, and whose ability to read English road signs is apparently optional. The hypocrisy is staggering. The American Trucking Association has called for serious scrutiny of non-domiciled CDL issuance and enforcement of entry-level driver training standards. Even they recognize this is a problem. But industry pressure alone isn't going to fix a system where state governments are actively undermining federal law as a matter of policy. What's the solution? Congressman Donald's legislation would allow DOT to conduct immigration and English proficiency checks at weigh stations nationwide. If a driver fails either check, they get detained. States that refuse to cooperate lose federal transportation funding. It's a stick approach, but when Karen hasn't worked for decades, maybe stick is what's needed. The question is whether Congress has the guts to pass it and whether the courts will uphold it when sanctuary states inevitably sue. This is bigger than just immigration policy. This is about whether we have a functional federal system or whether we've devolved into a patchwork of competing jurisdictions where following the law is optional if you disagree with it politically. If California can issue CDLs to people the federal government says are illegal aliens, what's stopping the other states from ignoring other federal laws they don't like? Where does it end? The families of people killed by unlicensed illegal immigrant truck drivers don't care about the political philosophy behind sanctuary policies. They care that their loved ones are dead because the system failed. And it's hard to argue the system isn't failing when a single enforcement operation can pull 146 illegal immigrant truck drivers off the road in one state in a matter of days. Look, immigration is complicated. Border policy is complicated. But the specific issue shouldn't be complicated at all. If you're not legally authorized to work in the United States, you shouldn't be able to get a commercial driver's license. Full stop. The fact that we even have to debate this is insane. The fact that states are issuing these licenses anyway is criminal negligence at minimum. So the next time you're driving down the highway and a semi blows past you at 75 miles per hour, ask yourself, does that driver have a legitimate right to be operating that vehicle? Because based on what we're learning from these enforcement operations, the answer might be more uncertain than would like to believe. And that should scare the heck out of everyone. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss an update. Your support lets me keep bringing you more content just like this. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.